The day my husband died, my daughter-in-law hugged me and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, you'll live with us forever." That night, she handed me papers to sign. 1 week later, I discovered the terrifying truth about what I'd actually signed. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Frances Walker, and at 68 years old, I thought I understood what family meant. I thought I knew the people I'd spent decades loving, nurturing, and sacrificing everything for. But sometimes, the most dangerous lies are the ones wrapped in familiar smiles and warm embraces. For 43 years, I was married to Robert Walker, the kind of man who still brought me flowers every Friday even when money was tight. We weren't wealthy people, but we were rich in the ways that mattered. We had built our life brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, always putting our children first. Robert worked construction until his back gave out, then security night shifts until retirement. I spent 35 years as a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital, working every holiday, pulling double shifts when the mortgage was due, and later when college tuition bills arrived. We raised 2 children in our modest 2-story colonial on Maple Street. Sarah, our daughter, was the easy one. She studied hard, got scholarships, and now works as a teacher in Oregon. She calls every Sunday without fail, and even though we see her only twice a year, our bond never weakened. Then there's Michael, our son. Michael was different. He struggled in school, changed majors 3 times, and needed more support, more money, more everything. But that's what parents do, isn't it? We give until there's nothing left to give, and then we find a way to give more. When Michael married Jennifer 8 years ago, I tried to love her like my own daughter. She was beautiful, charming, with perfectly manicured nails and a smile that could light up any room. She called me Mom from day one, something that touched my heart deeply. At their wedding, I gave them my mother's pearl necklace, the only valuable thing passed down through generations. Jennifer cried and promised to treasure it forever. I believed her. God help me, I believed everything she said. Robert and I had made our peace with a simple retirement. We had the house, paid off after 30 years of payments. We had our savings, modest but enough. And we had the crown jewel of our retirement dreams, a small villa by Lake Morrison that Robert inherited from his uncle. It wasn't fancy, just a 2-bedroom cottage with a screened porch and a view of the water, but it was ours. We'd planned to sell it eventually to cover medical expenses, or maybe leave it to the kids. Robert spent his last healthy summer fixing it up, replacing boards on the deck, painting the shutters blue like the sky. I remember the morning Robert died like it was yesterday, October 15th, a Tuesday. He was sitting in his brown leather recliner, the one that was molded to his shape after 20 years, reading the newspaper and complaining about the headlines like always. Then suddenly, he wasn't complaining anymore. The massive heart attack took him before the paramedics even arrived. One moment we were planning to visit Sarah for Thanksgiving, and the next, I was a widow. At the funeral, Jennifer never left my side. She handled everything when I couldn't even remember my own name through the grief. She stood at the podium and spoke about what a wonderful father-in-law Robert had been, how he'd welcomed her into the family with open arms. Michael seemed distant, hollow-eyed, but Jennifer explained he was processing his grief differently. Men do that, she said. They go quiet when their hearts are breaking. That night, after everyone had left and the house felt like a tomb, Jennifer stayed behind. She made me tea, held my hand, and told me I'd never be alone. Then she pulled out those papers. My life before that terrible October had a rhythm to it, like a song you've heard so many times you could hum it in your sleep. Every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, I'd wake up without an alarm clock. 40 years of hospital shifts had trained my body better than any device could. Robert would still be sleeping, snoring that soft rumble that used to annoy me when we were young, but had become the soundtrack of my nights. I'd slip out of bed quietly, pad down to the kitchen in my worn terry cloth slippers, and start the coffee in the same Mr. Coffee machine we'd received as a wedding gift. The kitchen was my sanctuary. Sunlight would stream through the east window, catching the prisms I'd hung there, scattering tiny rainbows across the yellow walls. Robert had painted them that color 15 years ago when I mentioned it, reminded me of sunshine. My blue coffee mug, the one with "World's Best Wife" written in fading gold letters, would be waiting in its spot by the coffee maker. Robert had surprised me with it on our 40th anniversary, along with 40 yellow roses. "One for each year you've put up with me," he'd said, that crooked smile making my heart skip just like when we were teenagers. After coffee, I'd tend to my garden. Those roses were my pride and joy. The hybrid teas, the climbers, the David Austin varieties that smelled like heaven itself. I'd won 3 blue ribbons at the county fair for my double delight roses. Robert had built the arbor himself, and every spring we'd sit beneath it, drinking lemonade and watching the world wake up. The neighbors would often stop by, asking for gardening advice or just admiring the blooms. Mrs. Henderson from next door would joke that my roses were the only reason property values stayed high on our street. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteered at the public library, teaching basic computer skills to other seniors. It was my way of giving back, after Sarah had patiently taught me how to use email and Facebook to keep in touch with the grandchildren. Some of my students were in their 80s, determined to learn how to video chat with grandchildren stationed overseas or living across the country. We'd laugh at our mistakes, celebrate small victories like successfully sending an email, and I'd always bring homemade cookies for the class. Wednesdays were for grocery shopping at Morton's, where I'd worked part-time after retiring from nursing. The manager, Tony, would always set aside the best cuts of meat for me. Knowing Sunday dinner was sacred in the Walker household, I'd plan the menu carefully. Pot roast with Yorkshire pudding, Michael's favorite since he was 7 years old. Green beans the way Jennifer liked them, with almonds and butter. Robert's beloved apple pie, made from scratch with the recipe his mother had passed down to me. Sunday dinners were the heartbeat of our family life. Michael and Jennifer would arrive at 4 o'clock sharp, their 2 children, Emma and James, bursting through the door like tiny hurricanes. The house would fill with laughter and chaos. Robert would immediately take the kids to the garage to show them whatever project he was working on, while Michael would help me in the kitchen, stealing bites of food like he did when he was 12. Jennifer would set the table with the good china, the set my mother had given us, always commenting on how beautiful it was. Those evenings would stretch into night, the kids falling asleep on the couch, while we adults talked over coffee and dessert. We'd discuss everything and nothing, from Michael's latest business ventures to Jennifer's book club selections. Robert would tell the same stories about his construction days, and we'd all pretend we hadn't heard them 100 times before. Jennifer would help me clear the dishes, and in those quiet kitchen moments, she'd tell me I was the mother she'd always wished for. The Lake Villa was our weekend escape, just an hour's drive but a world away. Robert had spent the last 2 years making it perfect for our retirement. New appliances, refinished hardwood floors, a renovated bathroom with a walk-in shower for our aging bodies. We'd go there once a month, sometimes with Michael's family, sometimes just the 2 of us. We'd sit on the dock, feet dangling in the water, planning our future. "When I retire completely," I'd say, "we'll spend every summer here." Robert would squeeze my hand and add, "Every summer until we're too old to remember our own names." This was the life I knew. Predictable, comfortable, filled with small joys and the security of routine. A life built on trust, family, and the absolute certainty that the people we loved would never hurt us. 3 days after we buried Robert, I was sitting in the living room, still in my black dress from receiving visitors, when I noticed Jennifer moving through my house with her phone held up like a camera. She was methodical about it, starting in the dining room, taking photos of the china cabinet from multiple angles. The way she zoomed in on the silver service set made something twist in my stomach, though I couldn't say why. "What are you doing, dear?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Jennifer turned to me with that brilliant smile of hers, the one that had charmed Michael at their first meeting. "Oh, Mom, I'm just taking photos for insurance purposes. After what happened to Robert, we need to make sure everything is properly documented. You know how insurance companies can be." It sounded reasonable. Everything Jennifer said always sounded reasonable. But there was something about the way she lingered over Robert's vintage watch collection, taking close-ups of each piece. Robert had inherited most of them from his father, a watchmaker who'd fled Germany before the war. They weren't terribly valuable, except for the 1940s Omega, but they meant the world to Robert. He'd wanted Michael to have them someday. I watched as she moved into Robert's study, photographing his desk, the bookshelf with his first edition books, even the old map of Pennsylvania that had been in his family for generations. She opened drawers I hadn't touched since Robert died, rifling through papers before photographing their contents. When she found the folder marked Lake Villa, she spent an especially long time with it. "Jennifer, honey, I don't think the insurance needs to know about every piece of paper," I said, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. She laughed, that tinkling sound like wind chimes. "You can never be too careful, Mom. Besides, I'm helping you get organized. This must be so overwhelming for you." That evening, I was bringing her and Michael coffee in the living room when I heard her on the phone. She was speaking in a low, urgent voice, quite different from her usual cheerful tone. I stopped just outside the doorway, the tray growing heavy in my hands. "Yes, we'll have everything sorted within the month," she was saying. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's still in shock from the funeral." There was a pause. "The villa alone should cover most of it. The house is worth at least $350 in this market, maybe more if we stage it right." My hands started trembling, making the cups rattle on the tray. Jennifer must have heard because she quickly said, "I have to go. We'll talk later." When I entered the room, she was putting her phone away, that smile back in place, but somehow different now, sharper around the edges. "Oh, Mom, let me help you with that." She jumped up to take the tray, her movements a bit too quick, too eager. "Who was that on the phone?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just my sister. She's been worried about you, about all of us, really. She wanted to know if we needed anything." Jennifer's eyes met mine, and for the first time I noticed they didn't quite crinkle at the corners. When she smiled, "She's always been such a worrier." Michael was absorbed in his laptop, barely looking up when I handed him his coffee. He'd been like this since the funeral, distant and preoccupied. When I asked if he was all right, Jennifer answered for him. "He's just handling some urgent business stuff. You know how it is, the world doesn't stop even for grief." Later that night, after they'd left, I stood in Robert's study. Everything had been disturbed, though subtly. Papers weren't quite where they'd been. The desk drawer was closed, but not fully latched, something Robert would never have done. His filing system, alphabetical and precise, showed signs of tampering. The folder for the Lake Villa was at the front, though it should have been under L. I picked up the photo of Robert and me at the lake, taken just this past summer. We were laughing at something. I couldn't remember what now, but we looked happy. Completed. Like we knew our future was secure. I traced his face with my finger and whispered, "Robert, what's happening? Why do I feel like something's terribly wrong?" The house felt different that night, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. I spent the next morning convincing myself I was losing my mind. Grief does terrible things to people, doesn't it? Makes you paranoid, suspicious, see threats where there are none. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, the morning sun warming my face, and gave myself a stern talking to. "Francis Walker," I said out loud to the empty room, "you're being ridiculous. This is Jennifer. Jennifer who stayed up all night with you when Robert had his first heart scare 3 years ago. Jennifer who organized the entire funeral when you couldn't even remember to eat." I thought about all the kindnesses she'd shown over the years. The Mother's Day cards that always arrived early, signed "Love your daughter Jennifer," because she knew Sarah lived so far away. The way she'd learned to make Robert's favorite German potato salad from his mother's recipe, spending an entire afternoon with me in the kitchen getting it just right. The times she'd driven me to doctor's appointments when Robert couldn't, sitting in those sterile waiting rooms, reading old magazines just to keep me company. When the doorbell rang that afternoon, it was Jennifer with a casserole dish and fresh flowers. "I thought you might not feel like cooking," she said, breezing into the kitchen like she belonged there. "It's that chicken and rice dish you like, the one with the almonds on top." She was wearing one of her perfect outfits, a cream-colored sweater and dark slacks, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked put together while I was still in yesterday's clothes, probably smelling like grief and neglect. She didn't mention it, just started moving around my kitchen, putting the casserole in the refrigerator, arranging the flowers in my good crystal vase. "I saw you in Robert's study yesterday," I said carefully, watching her reaction. She didn't miss a beat. "Oh, Mom, I hope you don't mind. Michael asked me to look for some paperwork. Something about Robert's pension that might help with the funeral expenses. I should have asked first. I'm so sorry." Her eyes were wide with concern, and she reached out to touch my arm. Her manicured nails were perfect as always, painted a soft pink. "We're just trying to take care of everything so you don't have to worry. You've been through enough." It made perfect sense. Of course Michael would need pension information. Of course they were trying to help. I felt ashamed of my suspicions. "I'm sorry," I said, tears starting to flow. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I keep thinking everyone's out to get me. Yesterday, I even thought Mrs. Henderson was stealing my mail when she was just bringing it to the door for me." Jennifer pulled me into a hug, and I could smell her expensive perfume, the one Michael bought her every Christmas. "Oh, Mom, this is completely normal. When my grandmother died, my mother accused everyone of taking her things. Grief makes us do and think strange things. You're not going crazy, you're just hurting." She made me tea, using the good china teapot, and we sat together at the kitchen table. She told me stories about her own family, about losing her grandmother when she was young, how it had affected everyone differently. Michael was lucky to have her, I thought. She understood loss. She understood family. "I found you going through the filing cabinet last week," I mentioned, trying to make it sound like a casual observation. "The insurance papers," she said immediately. "I called them and they need an inventory of the house contents for the life insurance claim. It's so much paperwork, Mom. But don't worry, I'm handling all of it. That's what family does." She pulled out a folder from her designer handbag, showing me forms with official-looking letterheads. "See? All this needs to be filed within 30 days or you might lose some benefits. I didn't want to burden you with it." I nodded, feeling foolish. Here was Jennifer, taking time from her own life, her own grief, to help me with bureaucratic nightmares I couldn't face. And I was sitting here suspecting her of… what? What exactly did I think she was doing? "Your family," I said, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "I should trust you. I do trust you. I'm sorry for being so difficult." Jennifer squeezed back, her smile warm and reassuring. "Never apologize for grieving, Mom. We're here for you. Michael and I will take care of everything. You just focus on healing." But even as I nodded and smiled back, something cold settled in my chest when I noticed she was wearing my mother's pearl necklace, the one I'd given her at her wedding. Strange time to wear it, I thought, then pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid. Again. The unraveling began with something as simple as looking for my insurance card. It was Thursday morning, 2 weeks after Robert's funeral, and I had a doctor's appointment that afternoon. My blood pressure medication needed refilling, and Dr. Patterson's office had called saying they needed to update my insurance information. I went to the filing cabinet in Robert's study, where we'd always kept important documents. The medical folder was there, but it was empty, except for some old receipts from Robert's prescriptions. Strange. I was certain our insurance cards had been filed there just last month when we'd updated our coverage. Moving to the next folder, labeled Funeral Plans, I expected to find copies of the papers Jennifer had me sign that night. We'd always been meticulous about keeping duplicates of everything. But this folder was empty too. Not just empty, but pristine, like it had never held a single document. My heart began to beat faster as I went through folder after folder. The life insurance policies were there, thank God, but the property deeds were missing. The folder marked Lake Villa that Jennifer had photographed so carefully was completely empty. Our will, the one Robert and I had updated just last year, was gone. I called the funeral home, Brennan and Sons, where Robert's service had been held. The receptionist was patient as I explained I needed copies of the paperwork for my records. Mrs. Walker, I'm showing here that all arrangements were handled by Jennifer Walker. The contracts would be in her name. But I signed papers, I insisted. The night my husband died, I signed several documents for the funeral arrangements. There was a pause as she checked. I'm sorry, Mrs. Walker, but we don't have any contracts with your signature. Everything was paid for and signed by Jennifer Walker. Would you like her contact information? My hands were shaking as I hung up. That made no sense. I distinctly remembered signing multiple pages, Jennifer guiding my hand to the signature lines, her soft voice saying, "Just sign here, Mom, and here, one more, right here." I opened my laptop, the one Sarah had taught me to use, and logged into our online banking. I'd been avoiding looking at the accounts, unable to face the reality of Robert's death reflected in our finances. But there it was, October 28th, a $500 charge to Peterson Daniels and Associates Legal Services. I didn't know any Peterson or Daniels. We'd used the same lawyer, Larry Brennan, for 30 years. The charge description read, Property Transfer Documentation. Property transfer? My stomach lurched. I searched for the law firm online and found their website. They specialized in real estate law and estate planning. Their office was across town in the new commercial district where we never went. Why would I have paid them $500? I called the number on the website. A professional voice answered, Peterson, Daniels and Associates. How may I direct your call? This is Frances Walker. I see a charge on my bank statement from your firm, but I don't recall. Oh, Mrs. Walker. Yes, Mr. Peterson handled your property transfer. Would you like to schedule a follow-up appointment? Property transfer? My voice came out as a whisper. Yes, ma'am. The transfer of your residential properties to Michael and Jennifer Walker. Mr. Peterson can go over the details with you if you'd like to come in. I couldn't speak. The woman continued. Actually, I see here there's a note that you may want to review the documents. Sometimes clients have questions after the fact. Can I schedule you for next Tuesday at 2? Yes, I managed to say. Tuesday. After hanging up, I ran to the bathroom and was violently sick. This couldn't be happening. There had to be a mistake. I tried to remember that night more clearly, but it was all a blur of tears and exhaustion. Jennifer's soothing voice, the papers appearing before me, the pen in my hand. What exactly had she said? Something about taking care of everything, about funeral arrangements, about making sure Robert was honored properly. I searched frantically through the house for any copies of what I'd signed. I checked every drawer, every folder, even the stack of papers on the kitchen counter where Jennifer often left things. Nothing. It was as if those documents had evaporated into thin air. Then I remembered something. Our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had a security camera that partially covered our driveway. Maybe, just maybe, it had captured Jennifer taking things from the house. It was a long shot, but I was desperate for any proof that something was wrong, that I wasn't just a grieving old woman losing her mind. I needed evidence. I needed to understand what I had signed. Most of all, I needed to know why my son's wife, the woman who called me Mom, would be involved in something called a property transfer that I couldn't even remember agreeing to. Tuesday arrived with gray skies and a cold drizzle that matched my mood perfectly. I drove to the law offices of Peterson, Daniels and Associates, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The building was all glass and steel, nothing like Larry Brennan's comfortable office with its worn leather chairs and photos of his fishing trips. Mr. Peterson was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with a crisp suit and an apologetic expression that made my stomach drop before he even spoke. He pulled out a thick folder with my name on it and carefully arranged several documents on the mahogany desk between us. "Mrs. Walker, I want to start by saying that these documents are legally binding and have been properly filed with the county recorder's office." He adjusted his glasses nervously. "When you came in with your son and daughter-in-law, you seemed distressed, but they assured me you were fully aware of what you were signing." "I never came here," I said, my voice barely audible. "I've never been to this office before today." He frowned, flipping through papers. "You were here on October 20th at 4 p.m. You signed everything in my presence. I have my assistant's notes confirming your identity was verified through your driver's license." October 20th, 5 days after Robert died. I had no memory of leaving the house that day. Everything from that week was a blur of grief and sedatives the doctor had prescribed for sleep. "What exactly did I sign?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would destroy me. Mr. Peterson slid the first document toward me. "This is the deed transfer for your primary residence at 415 Maple Street. You've transferred full ownership to Michael and Jennifer Walker, effective immediately." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "This second document," he continued, sliding another paper forward, "transfers the property at 72 Lake Morrison Drive, also to Michael and Jennifer Walker. The Lake Villa, Robert's uncle's gift, our retirement dream. And this," he pushed the final document toward me, "transfers ownership of your 2018 Honda Accord to Jennifer Walker." I stared at my signature on each page. It was definitely mine, though shakier than usual, but I had no memory of signing these documents. None at all. "Mr. Peterson," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "That night, my daughter-in-law gave me papers to sign. She told me they were funeral arrangements. I was on sedatives. My husband had just died. I trusted her." His face went pale. He shuffled through his notes, then looked up at me with growing alarm. "Mrs. Walker, in my notes from that day, it says you were fully coherent and understood the transfers were gifts to your son to avoid probate complications." He paused, reading further. "But I also noted that Jennifer Walker did most of the talking, explaining that you wanted to simplify your affairs after your husband's passing." "She lied," I said flatly. "They both lied. I never agreed to give away everything I own. My husband and I worked our entire lives for those properties." Mr. Peterson was now visibly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Walker, if what you're saying is true, this could constitute elder financial abuse. The documents might be challenged based on undue influence or fraud." "Might be?" My voice rose. "I'm telling you I was deceived. I was drugged on prescription sedatives, grieving, and my daughter-in-law told me I was signing funeral papers." He pulled out another document. "There's more, I'm afraid. This power of attorney form gives Jennifer Walker complete control over your financial and medical decisions." The betrayal was complete. Not only had they stolen everything Robert and I had built, but they'd also stolen my autonomy, my right to make my own decisions. "Can you help me?" I asked. Mr. Peterson shook his head slowly. "I can't represent you since I prepared these documents, but I can recommend someone who specializes in elder law." He wrote a name on his business card. "Call Sarah Martinez. Tell her everything you've told me. And Mrs. Walker?" He paused, genuine sympathy in his eyes. "I'm going to review my notes and the video recording from that day. If there's evidence of coercion, I'll make it available to your attorney." I left his office and sat in my car in the parking lot, rain streaming down the windshield. Then I called Michael. "Hi, Mom," he answered casually like it was any other day. "I just left Mr. Peterson's office," I said. The silence on the other end told me everything. "Michael, how could you? How could you steal everything your father and I worked for?" When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, unfamiliar. "It's not stealing, Mom. You signed the papers. Besides, you're getting older. This is for the best. Jennifer and I will take care of everything." "Taking care of me by making me homeless? You're being dramatic. We found a nice assisted living facility for you. Your Social Security will cover most of it." The son I had sacrificed everything for, the boy whose hand I held through nightmares, whose college I paid for by working double shifts, had planned this. He had watched his wife deceive me and done nothing. No, worse than nothing. He had participated. The meeting with Sarah Martinez, the elder law attorney, opened my eyes to the true scope of what Michael and Jennifer had orchestrated. Sarah was a fighter, with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She'd handled hundreds of elder abuse cases, but even she seemed shocked as the full picture emerged. "Francis, I've pulled the property records," she said, spreading documents across her desk. "The Lake Villa was listed for sale 3 days after the transfer. They're asking $400,000, and they already have 2 offers." $400,000. Robert had always said it was worth a fortune, being one of the last undeveloped lakefront properties in the area. He'd refused multiple offers over the years, insisting it would be our legacy. "There's more," Sarah continued. "I had my investigator do some digging. Michael's business, the one you helped fund, filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago. He owes nearly $300,000 to creditors." The room felt airless. 6 months ago. When Jennifer started being extra attentive, visiting more often, insisting on helping with our finances. When she'd convinced Robert to add her name to our emergency credit card, just in case something happened. "I also found this." Sarah pulled up something on her computer. Email records from Jennifer's account, which we subpoenaed. She'd been researching elderly parent property transfer and power of attorney without consent, dating back 8 months. She turned the screen toward me. There were dozens of searches. How to transfer parent property to children, avoiding elder abuse detection, legal ways to obtain parents' assets, statute of limitations, elder financial abuse, Pennsylvania. "This one is particularly damning," Sarah pointed to an email Jennifer had sent to someone named Derek. She writes, "Once the old man kicks it, we move fast. The widow will be vulnerable, easy to manipulate. We can have everything transferred before she knows what hit her." Old man. Kicks it. The casual cruelty of it made me physically ill. "Who's Derek?" I asked. "Jennifer's brother. He's a realtor who specializes in quick cash sales. He's already got buyers lined up for both properties." Sarah pulled up another document. "But here's where it gets worse, Francis. They've been slowly draining your accounts for months." She showed me bank records I hadn't seen. Small transfers, $500 here, $750 there, all to accounts I didn't recognize. The emergency credit card Jennifer had access to showed charges for luxury items, vacations, expensive dinners. Over $30,000 in the last 6 months alone. "Robert was sick," I said, remembering. "He was on medication, tired all the time. We thought it was his heart condition." Sarah's expression darkened. "When did Jennifer start helping with his medications?" My blood ran cold. "About 8 months ago. She said she wanted to help, make sure he took everything on schedule." "Francis, I'm not suggesting anything, but in cases like these, we sometimes find that medication management becomes a tool for keeping victims compliant or confused." I thought about Robert's increasing confusion in his final months, how he'd complained about feeling foggy, unlike himself. The doctors had said it was normal for his condition, but what if... "There's something else," Sarah said gently. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, came forward after hearing you were investigating. She has security footage of Jennifer and Michael removing items from your house while you were at the funeral home. Artwork, jewelry, even small furniture pieces." She played the video on her computer. There they were, loading Robert's antique clock into their SUV, the one his grandfather had brought from Germany. Jennifer carrying out boxes of what looked like photo albums, our family history. They also changed the locks on the Lake Villa yesterday, Sarah added. The neighbor there called the police, but Jennifer showed them the deed. It's legally their property now. I watched Jennifer on the video, directing Michael like a general commanding troops. This wasn't grief-driven desperation. This was a calculated plan executed with precision. Mrs. Henderson also reported something interesting, Sarah continued. Jennifer's been showing people through your house. Told them she's planning major renovations once the current occupant relocates. Current occupant. That's what I'd become in my own home. How long have they been planning this? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Sarah pulled up one final document. This is from a private investigator. Jennifer did something similar with an elderly aunt 5 years ago in Ohio. The aunt died before she could contest it, but the family suspected foul play. No charges were filed due to lack of evidence. The pattern was clear. Jennifer wasn't just an opportunist. She was a predator who specialized in vulnerable elderly people, and Michael had either been corrupted by her or was complicit from the beginning. Either way, the son I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for had become a stranger who saw me not as his mother, but as a mark. We're going to fight this, Frances, Sarah said firmly. We have evidence of fraud, undue influence, and elder abuse. But I need to ask, are you prepared for what this means? You'll be going against your own son. I thought of Robert, of the life we'd built, of the dreams we'd shared. I thought of that email calling him the old man who would kick it. They stopped being family the moment they planned this, I said. Now they're just criminals who happen to know where I kept my spare key. That night, alone in the house that was no longer legally mine, I completely fell apart. The weight of the betrayal crashed down on me like a physical force, driving me to my knees on the kitchen floor where I'd made thousands of meals for the son who had sold me out for money. I crawled to Robert's chair, pulling myself into it, and the smell of his cologne still lingering in the leather broke something inside me. The sobbing came from somewhere deep, primal, a sound I didn't recognize as my own voice. It was the wail of a mother who had lost her child not to death, but to greed, which was somehow worse. The photo albums were still on the shelf, apparently not valuable enough for Jennifer to steal yet. I pulled out the one labeled Michael's First Years and opened it with shaking hands. There he was, minutes after birth, red and screaming, placed on my chest. I remembered whispering, "Mommy will always protect you, always love you no matter what." Page after page of lies. Michael taking his first steps, arms outstretched toward me. Michael's first day of kindergarten clinging to my leg, not wanting me to leave. The Halloween when he was 7 and insisted on being a superhero because superheroes protect. People like you protect me, Mommy. I found the receipt tucked into the album, the second mortgage we'd taken out for his college tuition. Robert had been against it, worried about retirement, but I'd insisted. He's our son, I'd said. We invest in our children. $40,000 that took us 15 years to pay back, years when Robert needed new glasses but said his old ones were fine, when I wore the same winter coat for a decade. There was the photo from his college graduation, my face beaming with pride, despite the exhaustion from working 3 straight night shifts to afford the trip. Michael had his arm around me, smiling that same crooked smile he'd had since childhood. When had that smile become a mask? I remembered the day he'd called, panicked, saying his business was failing and he might lose everything. Without hesitation, Robert and I had emptied our emergency fund, $25,000 meant for medical expenses, and given it to him. "Family helps family," Robert had said, writing the check. Jennifer had cried with gratitude, promising they'd pay us back with interest. That was 2 years ago. They'd never paid back a cent. The Christmas photos were the worst. Every year, the same tradition. Michael and his family at our house, presents piled high under the tree. I'd saved all year for those presents, shopping sales, hiding things in the closet. Last Christmas, I'd given Jennifer a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to Robert's mother, another family heirloom she'd admired. She'd hugged me so tight, called me the best mother-in-law in the world, while she was planning to rob me blind. I found the Mother's Day card from last year, Michael's handwriting, "To the best mom in the world. Thank you for always being there, for every sacrifice, for showing me what unconditional love means." Unconditional love. He'd learned what it meant, all right. He'd learned it meant he could take everything and I'd still love him. And the horrible truth was, I did. Even now, even after everything, I loved my son. That's when the deepest pain hit. Not just the betrayal, but the fool I'd been. Every warning sign I'd ignored, every excuse I'd made for him. When money went missing from my purse, I'd blamed my own forgetfulness. When Jennifer seemed too interested in our finances, I'd thought she was being helpful. When Michael grew distant, I'd assumed it was work stress. I thought about calling Sarah my daughter, but shame overwhelmed me. How could I tell her that I'd given everything to the child who deserved nothing, while she, who called faithfully and loved genuinely, got so much less? The inequality of my love felt like another betrayal. Robert would be devastated. He'd worked construction until his hands were permanently damaged, taken every overtime shift, eaten peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for 30 years to save money. "We're building something, Franny," he'd say. "Something to leave the kids, something that matters." I pulled out our wedding album. 19 years old, both of us, standing in front of St. Mary's Church. We'd had nothing then except hope and determination. Robert's whispered promise at the altar, "I'll take care of you forever." He had. He'd taken care of all of us, and this was how his son repaid him. The pills were in the medicine cabinet, the ones for sleep, the ones for pain, the ones for blood pressure. It would be so easy to take them all, to follow Robert, to stop feeling this unbearable pain of being betrayed by the life you'd created. My hand hovered over the bottles. Then I saw it. Robert's note still stuck to the mirror where he'd put it the morning before he died. "Franny, don't forget you're the strongest woman I know. Love you forever, R." The strongest woman he knew. Not a victim, not a fool, a strong woman who'd survived poverty, miscarriages, cancer, and 40 years of hard labor. A woman who deserved better than to be discarded like garbage by the people she'd loved most. I put the pills back and walked to the window. The sun was rising, painting the sky the same pink as the roses in my garden. Those roses that had survived drought, disease, and brutal winters to bloom again and again. If they could survive, so could I. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror the next morning, really looking at myself for the first time since Robert's death. The woman staring back wasn't the broken widow Jennifer and Michael expected to shuffle quietly into some cut-rate nursing home. I saw my mother's stubborn jaw, my father's determined eyes. I saw the young nurse who'd fought off a violent patient twice her size. I saw the woman who'd survived breast cancer at 45 when the doctors gave me a 30% chance. I was Frances Walker, and I was not going down without a fight. The first call was to Sarah, my daughter. I'd put it off out of shame, but now shame transformed into fury, and fury into determination. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright with love. "Mom, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" "Sarah, I need you to come home. Can you get on a plane today?" The brightness vanished, replaced by alarm. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you sick?" "No, sweetheart, I'm not sick. But Michael and Jennifer have done something terrible, and I need you here." I told her everything. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then Sarah spoke, her voice deadly calm. "I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be there by tonight. And Mom, pack anything valuable that's left. We're going to war." Sarah had always been the fighter. the one who stood up to bullies on the playground, who reported her college professor for harassment when everyone else stayed quiet. I'd needed Michael to be my baby boy forever, but Sarah had become my warrior, and now I needed a warrior. The next call was to Robert's best friend, Judge Harold Mitchell, retired but still connected to every legal mind in the state. Harold had known Michael since he was in diapers, had taught him to fish, had been like an uncle to both kids. "Franny," Harold's voice was gruff with emotion after I explained, "that boy, Robert, would be spinning in his grave. You leave this to me. I know people who eat cases like this for breakfast." Then I called Robert's brother, Tom, the police officer who'd just retired from the force after 30 years. Tom listened in silence, then said 5 words that gave me hope. "I still have friends downtown." But the most important call was to Mrs. Henderson. My neighbor wasn't just a gossip. She was a one-woman surveillance system with a memory like a computer and the moral outrage of an Old Testament prophet. "Frances Walker, you get over here right now," she commanded. "I've been documenting everything, and honey, you're not going to believe what I've captured." In her living room, Mrs. Henderson had created what looked like a detective's evidence board. Photos printed from her security cameras, dates and times noted, a log of every time Jennifer and Michael had visited in the past year. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a photo dated 6 months ago. "Jennifer coming out of your house with a box while you and Robert were at his doctor's appointment. And here, 3 months ago, Michael in your garage during your Tuesday library volunteer shift." She had dozens of photos, videos, even audio from when they'd talked in the driveway, not knowing her new security system had sound recording. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson said, pulling up a video on her tablet. "This is from last week, the day before you went to that lawyer." The video showed Jennifer and a man I didn't recognize walking through my backyard, Jennifer pointing at the house, gesturing animatedly. The audio was faint but clear enough. "Once we get her out, we gut the kitchen first. These old houses flip for huge profits if you modernize them right." "Who's the man?" I asked. "Developer named Craig Morrison. He specializes in buying homes from elderly people and flipping them. Jennifer's been meeting with him for months." Months. While she was calling me mom and bringing me casseroles, she was planning to gut my home like a fish. I thought about the night Robert died, how Jennifer had appeared so quickly, how prepared she'd been with those papers. Had they been waiting? Watching? The thought made me sick, but it also made me angry. The kind of anger that burns clean, that clears away fog and fear and replaces them with purpose. "Mrs. Henderson, would you testify to all of this in court?" She drew herself up to her full 5'2". "Frances Walker, I've been your neighbor for 22 years. Robert helped my late husband build our deck. You brought me soup every day for a month after my surgery. You bet your life I'll testify. That Jennifer. Better hope I don't get my hands on her first." That evening, Sarah arrived like an avenging angel, still in her teaching clothes, eyes blazing with fury. She dropped her bags and held me tight. "Nobody messes with my mother," she whispered fiercely. "We're going to destroy them." Looking at my daughter, my real family, I felt something I hadn't felt since Robert died. Hope. Jennifer and Michael had made a crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was just a weak-old woman, broken by grief, easy to manipulate and discard. They were about to learn what Robert had always known. Frances Walker was the strongest woman he knew, and I was done being anyone's victim. Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table until 3 in the morning, building our strategy like generals planning a battle. She'd brought her laptop, her phone, and a legal pad that quickly filled with notes. My daughter had inherited her father's methodical mind and my stubborn streak. Jennifer and Michael had no idea what they'd awakened. "First, we need to understand exactly what we're fighting," Sarah said, pulling up the state statutes on elder abuse. "In Pennsylvania, what they did constitutes financial exploitation of an elderly adult. It's not just civil, it's criminal. They could face up to 7 years in prison." Prison. The word hung in the air. My son, the baby I'd nursed through pneumonia, could go to prison. Sarah saw my hesitation. Mom, he chose this. Every step of the way, he had chances to stop, to reconsider, to remember who raised him. He chose greed over family. She was right. I pushed past the maternal instinct and focused on the evidence we needed. The crucial discovery came when Sarah found a detail in the state law. Property transfers could be contested if signed under duress or through deception. But the real power was in something called undue influence, when someone in a position of trust manipulates a vulnerable person. The fact that I'd been on sedatives, that Robert had just died, that Jennifer had lied about the nature of the documents, it all built our case. We need more than the security footage, Sarah said. We need to catch them admitting it. That's when I remembered Robert's old tape recorder, the one he'd used for dictating construction notes. It was small enough to fit in my purse, voice-activated, and still sitting in his desk drawer. Sarah tested it, then coached me on what to say. You need to seem confused, vulnerable, she instructed. Let them think you're still the grieving widow they can manipulate. Get them talking about the properties, about their plans. Jennifer especially. She loves to brag when she thinks she's won. Harold Mitchell had come through with a brilliant attorney named David Chen, who specialized in elder fraud cases and had a reputation for being ruthless. When we met him, his first words were, "I've reviewed everything. They're going to jail if you want them to." But David had an even better plan. We're going to hit them where it really hurts, their wallets and their reputations. First, we file for an emergency injunction to stop the sale of the Lake Villa. Then we prepare both civil and criminal cases. But here's the key. We're going to expose them publicly. He explained that Jennifer and Michael had been living beyond their means for years, keeping up appearances in their upscale neighborhood. Jennifer was on the board of her country club, played tennis with the mayor's wife, had built an image as a devoted daughter-in-law. Michael had been trying to rebuild his business reputation after the bankruptcy. Public shame is sometimes worse than prison for people like them, David said. We're going to make them infamous. Tom, Robert's brother, had been busy too. His police contacts had discovered something disturbing. Jennifer had done this before, not once, but twice. An elderly aunt in Ohio who died mysteriously after signing over her assets, and before that, an elderly employer in Florida who'd gifted Jennifer $50,000 before developing sudden dementia. She's a serial predator, Tom said grimly. The FBI might be interested in this pattern. Mrs. Henderson had recruited what she called the Neighborhood Watch, 6 other elderly neighbors who'd noticed suspicious activity. Mrs. Chen, from 2 doors down, had seen Jennifer and Michael measuring rooms in my house while I was at Robert's funeral. Mr. Petrosky had overheard them discussing getting the old lady out by New Year's. But the master stroke came from Sarah. Mom, we're going to call a family meeting. Tell Michael you want to discuss your living arrangements. Make it sound like you're ready to capitulate, but we're going to fill that room with witnesses. We spent the next 3 days preparing. I practiced with the tape recorder until I could activate it without looking. Sarah coordinated with David Chen to ensure everything we did was legal and admissible. Tom arranged for his former partner, Detective Lisa Rodriguez, to be on standby. We also discovered Jennifer's weakness, her sister, Patricia, who lived in Michigan. Sarah found Patricia's Facebook page, full of complaints about Jennifer. My sister, the one who thinks she's too good for the rest of us now. A private message from Sarah yielded gold. Patricia was bitter about Jennifer cutting her out of the aunt's inheritance in Ohio, and was willing to provide a sworn statement about Jennifer's pattern of elder exploitation. The final piece came when David's investigator found Jennifer's secret bank account, opened 6 months ago, already containing $45,000, all traceable to small transfers from my and Robert's accounts over the past year. She'd been stealing long before Robert died, just waiting for the big score. We need to set the meeting for Thursday, Sarah said. That gives us 2 days to get everyone in place. I called Michael, keeping my voice weak and defeated. I'd like to discuss my living arrangements. Could you and Jennifer come to the house Thursday at 3? Of course, Mom, he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. We'll bring the brochures for the assisted living facility. You're going to love it. As I hung up, I looked at Robert's photo on the mantel. They're about to learn what happens when they mess with a walker, I whispered. The trap was set. Now we just had to spring it. Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth for November, the sun shining like it wanted to witness what was about to unfold. I spent the morning arranging the living room with military precision. Every seat had a purpose. Every angle had been considered. Sarah had arrived early, positioning herself in the corner where she could see everyone but remain partially hidden by the bookshelf. At exactly 2:30, our witnesses began arriving through the back door. Tom and Detective Rodriguez took their positions in the kitchen, where they could hear everything through the open doorway. Harold Mitchell, the retired judge, settled into Robert's chair with a newspaper, looking like a family friend paying a casual visit. David Chen, my attorney, waited in the dining room with his legal assistant, documents spread before them. Mrs. Henderson had outdone herself. She'd recruited Mrs. Chen and Mr. Petrosky to be working in my garden, visible through the window but within earshot if voices were raised. She herself was stationed on her porch with her book club friend, actually another retired police officer Tom had contacted. I placed Robert's tape recorder in my purse, testing it one final time. The little red light blinked, confirming it was voice-activated and ready. Sarah had also set up her phone to record video from the bookshelf, hidden behind a framed photo. At 2:45, I took my sedatives. Just half a dose, enough to seem slightly foggy, but not enough to impair my judgment. I needed them to believe I was still the medicated, grieving widow they could manipulate. You ready, Mom? Sarah whispered, squeezing my hand. I've been ready since the day they decided I was worthless, I replied. At 2:55, I sat in my usual spot on the sofa, the family photo album strategically placed on the coffee table. The house felt electric with anticipation, like the moment before lightning strikes. Every person hidden or positioned throughout my home was here because Michael and Jennifer had destroyed not just my trust, but the very concept of family loyalty. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 yow. They were always punctual when they thought they were winning. I opened the door to find them dressed like they were attending a business meeting. Michael wore his best suit, the one I'd bought him for his wedding. Jennifer looked immaculate in a cream-colored dress, carrying an expensive leather folder and wearing my mother's pearl necklace, the family heirloom I'd given her that she was already wearing as if I were dead. Mom, Michael said, leaning in for a perfunctory hug that felt like embracing a stranger. Francis, Jennifer chirped, her smile so bright it could have powered the neighborhood. You look wonderful. Grief counseling must be helping. I hadn't told them about any grief counseling. They'd been checking up on me. As they entered, I saw Jennifer's eyes sweep the room, already calculating what would go where in her renovation. She paused at Robert's chair, where Harold sat reading his newspaper. Oh, I didn't know you had company, she said, her smile faltering slightly. This is Harold, Robert's old friend. He just stopped by, but he's welcome to stay. We're all family here, aren't we? I said, watching her process this unexpected element. Michael barely acknowledged Harold, his discomfort with father figures showing. He'd always been intimidated by Robert's friends, these men who'd built their lives with their hands and their honor. They settled onto the love seat across from me, Jennifer placing her leather folder on the coffee table with practiced precision. Inside, I glimpsed brochures with titles like Golden Years Assisted Living and Sunset Manor Care Facility. She'd even bookmarked pages with sticky notes. Can I get you both some coffee? I offered, my voice deliberately shaky. I just made a fresh pot. That would be lovely, Mom, Jennifer said, already opening her folder. While you do that, we can start looking through these wonderful options we've found for you. As I stood, I made sure to stumble, slightly, catching myself on the arm of the sofa. I saw Jennifer and Michael exchange a look, the kind that said their prey was even weaker than they'd hoped. Walking to the kitchen, I passed Tom and Detective Rodriguez. Tom gave me the slightest nod. Everything was in place. I returned with the coffee tray, my hands trembling just enough to make the cups rattle. It wasn't entirely an act. Knowing what was about to happen, what I was about to do to my own son, made my body revolt even as my mind stayed firm. "Now then," Jennifer said, her voice taking on that condescending tone people use with children and the elderly. "Shall we discuss your exciting new future?" I sat back down, clutched my purse with the recorder close, and prepared to give the performance of my lifetime. "Yes," I said weakly. "Let's discuss exactly what you've planned for me." Jennifer spread the brochures across the coffee table like she was dealing cards in a game she'd already won. "This one is our favorite, Sunset Manor. It's clean, the staff seems competent, and your Social Security will cover most of it. You'll only need to contribute about $500 a month from your pension." "But I won't have my pension if you've taken everything," I said, letting confusion color my voice. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but Jennifer's smile never wavered. "Oh, Mom, don't be silly. We haven't taken anything. You gave us those properties as gifts, remember, to avoid probate complications." I thought I was signing funeral papers," I said, clutching my purse tighter. Jennifer laughed, that tinkling sound I'd once found charming. "Francis, you were completely aware of what you were signing. Mr. Peterson explained everything thoroughly." "That's not true," I said, allowing my voice to strengthen slightly. "You told me they were funeral arrangements. I was on sedatives. Robert had just died." The mask slipped for just a moment, Jennifer's eyes hardening. "Well, it doesn't matter what you think you remember. The papers are legal and filed." "Why would you do this to me?" I asked, looking directly at Michael. "I'm your mother." Michael couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, you're getting older. You can't manage those properties. We're doing you a favor." "A favor?" My voice cracked. "Selling my home? Robert's Lake Villa?" Jennifer leaned forward, her voice dropping to a harder tone. "Listen, Francis, this discussion is pointless. It's done. The villa already has buyers. This house will be renovated and sold by spring. You should be grateful we're finding you a nice place instead of just putting you on the street." There it was, the real Jennifer, finally showing herself. "Grateful?" I stood up slowly. "Grateful that you stole everything my husband and I worked for?" "Stole is such an ugly word," Jennifer said, also standing. "You signed willingly. The fact that you were too stupid to read what you were signing isn't our problem." "Jennifer," Michael hissed, glancing nervously at Harold, who had lowered his newspaper. But Jennifer was on a roll now, her carefully constructed mask completely gone. "What?" "She needs to hear the truth. Your mother has been sitting on a gold mine while we've been struggling. Do you know what we could have done with that money years ago? But no, she had to hold on to everything like a selfish old dragon." "I gave you everything," I said to Michael. "Your college, your business startup, bailouts every time you failed." "And held it over my head forever," Michael suddenly exploded. Perfect Michael who needed his mommy's help, while Sarah got to be the independent one, the successful one. "You think I didn't know you loved her more?" The room went very still. Even Jennifer looked shocked at Michael's outburst. "So you decided to rob me?" I asked quietly. "It's not robbery when you're too senile to know what you're signing," Jennifer snapped, then immediately realized what she'd said. "I'm not senile," I said clearly, all pretense of confusion gone. "And I have that entire confession recorded." Jennifer lunged for my purse, but Harold stood up. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, young lady." "Who the hell are you?" Jennifer snarled. "Judge Harold Mitchell, retired, and I've heard enough to know that what you've just admitted to constitutes elder fraud, financial exploitation, and conspiracy." That's when Detective Rodriguez entered from the kitchen, badge visible. "Jennifer Walker, Michael Walker, you're under arrest for financial exploitation of an elderly adult. But the real twist came when Jennifer's phone rang. She looked at the screen, her face going white. Patricia, why are you... I could hear her sister's voice from across the room. The FBI just left my house, Jenny. They know about Aunt Helen. They know about Mr. Jameson in Florida. They know everything. Jennifer dropped the phone, staring at me in shock. Your sister was very helpful, I said. Apparently, you've been doing this for years. The FBI is very interested in your pattern of elderly exploitation across state lines. Michael collapsed onto the sofa, head in his hands. Jennifer, what is she talking about? What pattern? Your wife is a serial predator, Tom said, entering from the kitchen. She's done this at least 3 times before. You just happened to be her ticket to the biggest score. Jennifer tried to run, but Mrs. Henderson and her book club friend, the off-duty officer, were already at the door. The beautiful part, David Chen said, entering from the dining room with his documents, is that not only are the property transfers being reversed due to fraud, but Jennifer's secret account with $45,000 of stolen money. That's evidence of an ongoing criminal enterprise. As the handcuffs clicked onto Jennifer's wrists, she turned to Michael with pure venom. This is your fault. Your pathetic attachment to Mommy ruined everything. Michael looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I didn't know about the others. I didn't know what she was. But you knew what you were doing to me, I said, and that's enough. As they were led away, Jennifer in handcuffs and Michael following voluntarily but broken, Harold put his hand on my shoulder. Robert would be proud of you, Francis. I watched the son I'd raised being put into a police car and felt something inside me break and reform, stronger, but forever changed. The courtroom was packed 6 months later when Jennifer received her sentence, 7 years in federal prison for interstate elder fraud, with no possibility of early parole. The FBI had connected her to 5 elderly victims across 3 states, with stolen assets totaling over $2 million. She stood in her orange jumpsuit, her perfect blonde hair now showing dark roots, as the judge called her a calculated predator who targeted society's most vulnerable members. Michael's fate was different but no less devastating. He pled guilty to conspiracy and received 3 years probation with mandatory counseling and 500 hours of community service at a senior center. The judge, showing mercy I hadn't requested, recognized that while Michael was complicit, he'd been manipulated by a master con artist. The condition that hurt him most: he was forbidden from contacting me for the duration of his probation unless I initiated contact. I didn't. The properties were returned to me immediately, and Jennifer's secret account was liquidated to pay restitution to her other victims. The Lake Villa, which Jennifer had already listed for $400,000, was taken off the market. I sold it myself 6 months later for $475,000 to a young family who promised to love it as Robert and I had. I donated half the proceeds to establish the Robert Walker Fund at the local senior center, providing legal assistance to elderly victims of financial abuse. My house on Maple Street was mine again, but it felt different. Sarah suggested I redecorate, make it truly mine for the first time. We painted the walls warm colors Robert had always been too practical to consider. I turned his study into an art studio, something I'd always dreamed of but never had space for. The garden bloomed more beautifully than ever, as if Robert's spirit was nurturing it from above. Mrs. Henderson became more than a neighbor. She became family. We had coffee every morning at 7 a.m., sharing gossip and guarding each other against the world's predators. She'd installed even more security cameras after everything happened, joking that our street was now safer than Fort Knox. The other neighbors, initially shocked by the scandal, had rallied around me. Mr. Petrosky mowed my lawn without being asked. Mrs. Chen brought soup every Sunday. Sarah took a leave of absence from her teaching job and stayed with me for 2 months after the trial. We healed together, mother and daughter, in a way we never had before. She helped me understand that my love for Michael hadn't been wrong. The wrong was what he'd chosen to do with that love. "You gave both your children the same love, Mom," she told me one evening as we sorted through family photos. "I used it to become strong. Michael used it to become weak. That's not your fault." We kept the photos of Michael as a child but packed away everything from the last 10 years. I couldn't bear to throw them out, but I couldn't look at them either. Sarah put the boxes in the attic, saying maybe someday I'd want them. I doubted it. The assisted living brochures Jennifer had brought became kindling for a bonfire Sarah and I had in the backyard. We roasted marshmallows over the flames of their schemes, laughing until we cried, then crying until we laughed again. Tom, Robert's brother, visited every week, bringing groceries and staying for dinner. Harold Mitchell introduced me to his widowed book club, a group of sharp-minded seniors who'd become my defenders and friends. David Chen refused to take his full fee, saying my case had reinvigorated his passion for justice. A year after Robert's death, I stood in my garden among the prize-winning roses, holding a cup of coffee in my favorite blue mug. The morning sun caught the prisms in the kitchen window, scattering rainbows across the grass. I was 69 years old, a widow, a mother who'd lost a son not to death, but to greed. But I was also a survivor, a fighter, a woman who'd refused to go quietly into whatever dark corner they'd tried to push me into. Jennifer's family had tried to reach out, asking me to forgive her, saying she was sick, that she needed help, not prison. I sent them a single response. She knew exactly what she was doing. Forgiveness isn't mine to give. Ask her other victims. Michael wrote me a letter that arrived on what would have been Robert's 70th birthday. Sarah found me holding it unopened, sitting in Robert's chair. "Do you want to read it?" she asked gently. "Someday," I said, putting it in the desk drawer. "But not today." Some wounds heal into scars. Others teach us to be more careful with our trust. The one thing Jennifer and Michael had taught me was that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to steal my life, they'd given me something unexpected, the knowledge that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, and a second chance to live on my own terms. Robert would have been proud. Standing in my kitchen 18 months after Robert's death, I prepare Sunday dinner for my real family. Sarah, her husband David, who flew in from Oregon, Mrs. Henderson, Tom, and Harold Mitchell. The table that once hosted my son's deception now overflows with genuine laughter and love. As I place the pot roast on the table, the same recipe I'd made for Michael countless times, I realize I'm not cooking for ghosts anymore. I'm cooking for the living, for the people who stood by me when my world collapsed. Sarah raises her glass of wine. To Mom, who taught us that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and fighting, even when it's your own family trying to keep you down. We clink glasses, and I feel Robert's presence, not as a sadness, but as a warm comfort. He'd always said I was the strongest woman he knew. It took losing everything to finally believe him. The requests to share my story started small, the senior center asking me to speak at their monthly meeting. Then the local news picked it up. Soon I was traveling to different communities, standing before rooms full of elderly faces, each carrying their own fears about trusting family, about becoming vulnerable, about losing control of their lives. The betrayal started long before the papers, I tell them. It started when I ignored my instincts, when I made excuses for behavior that didn't feel right, when I chose to believe lies because the truth was too painful to face. I share the warning signs I missed, the sudden increased attention when they'd been distant before, the interest in financial documents, the pushing for power of attorney just in case, the subtle suggestions that I was becoming forgetful when my mind was sharp. I tell them about Jennifer's research history on her computer, the slow theft that preceded the big score, the way they isolated me from others who might have helped. But most importantly, I tell them this: your life's work, your dignity, your autonomy. These are not gifts to be stolen by anyone, not even family. Love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be victimized. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to your life's savings. The questions always come. How do you protect yourself without destroying family relationships? What if they really do want to help? How can you trust anyone after this? My answers are hard but necessary truths. Set up safeguards while you're strong. Trusted lawyers, regular account monitoring, friends who will speak up if something seems wrong. Never sign anything without independent legal review, especially when you're grieving or medicated. And remember, that genuine love doesn't require you to sacrifice your security. Jennifer now serves her time in federal prison. I receive updates from the prosecutor. She's been disciplined multiple times for trying to run similar schemes on fellow inmates. A leopard doesn't change its spots, even in a cage. Michael completed his probation early for good behavior. He sent another letter last month through his therapist, claiming he's changed, that he understands what he did, that he wants to make amends. Sarah thinks I should read it. Tom says I should burn it. I've left it unopened in Robert's desk drawer with the first one. Maybe someday I'll be ready, maybe never. Both are acceptable choices. The strange gift in this nightmare is the community it's created. I receive letters from elderly parents whose children showed similar red flags, who confronted the situation before it was too late. 3 families have reconciled after honest conversations about boundaries and finances. Dozens more have protected themselves from potential exploitation. My story became a cautionary tale, but also a beacon of hope. If a 69-year-old widow, drugged and grieving, could fight back against her own son and his predator wife, then anyone could stand up for themselves. The roses in my garden bloom more beautifully each year, as if thriving on truth after being watered with so many lies. I tend them every morning, coffee in hand, Robert's spirit in the sunshine, and a hard-won peace in my heart. The blue mug still reads, World's Best Wife, but now I've added my own title, Survivor. Trust is not an obligation of family. It's earned through consistent, honest actions. Protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, not seek to exploit your vulnerabilities. And sometimes, the family you choose, the neighbors, friends, and strangers who stand by you, are more real than the family you're born with. What would you do if your own family betrayed you like this? Have you seen similar situations in your community? Are there elderly relatives in your life who might be vulnerable to this kind of exploitation? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched you or could help someone you know, please share it. You might save someone's life savings, their home, or their dignity. And remember, checking in on elderly neighbors and relatives isn't just kindness. It could be the difference between their security and their exploitation. What signs would you watch for? What safeguards would you put in place? Let's start this important conversation in the comments.